Spoiler alert. This podcast is a hybrid podcast where not only will we be talking about the last two episodes of The Wheel of Time on Amazon, episodes 7 and 8, but then we will also have a book reader section. They will be separated so that if you are not a book person, you don't have to hear the book reader part. So the TV part will be first, the book reader part will be second, and giving you plenty of time to turn off in between if you don't want to be spoiled. But I just thought I'd give you this warning in advance that we will be talking about the last two episodes of The Wheel of Time regarding our feedback. And if you haven't seen those yet, man, you're behind. Watch them and then come back and listen.
Part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.
Hello there, everybody. Welcome back to Bustin' Blockbusters. One last kind of wrap-up podcast regarding the Wheel of Time, and then we'll move on to other subjects as we go on throughout this new year of 2022. Hope that you had a safe and happy holiday season. My name is Matt Murdock. That's a double M, but you can just call me Matt, or you can call me Hey You if you wish. That's fine also. The podcast today is kind of a hybrid podcast in a way. We're going to start off with some TV-friendly stuff that you don't have to be a book reader in order to listen to or watch if you're watching on YouTube. But I always want to hear your thoughts, whether you're a book reader or a non-book reader. The second half of this podcast is regarding how things in the last two episodes, episode 7, The Dark Along the Ways, and episode 8, The Eye of the World, pertained in relation to the books themselves, what we saw, where it might have been pulled from in the books, those kinds of things. I'll give you fair warning if you're a TV-only person to get out of this particular presentation so that you can turn it off and not be spoiled if that is your wish. I mean, quite frankly, I don't care if you want to be spoiled and watch the book reader part, even if you don't read the books. That's up to you. I mean, the level that we spoil you is always in your control simply by turning things on or off. Nonetheless, you can have that control, and I will give you fair warning when we get into the book stuff. I'm going to have a couple of great guests with me regarding the books as well this time around, so you won't just have to hear me rambling with my limited knowledge of the books, because I can't remember everything from every single book. I've got John and Chris from TV Podcast Industries who are going to be joining me to talk about the books. One is a fairly new reader. John is a fairly new reader. He's just finished book 2, I believe. And then Chris is very intimate with the series. He knows it backwards and forwards. Again, listen to TV Podcast Industries wherever you get your podcasts, and they're great. They're fun. They have a lot of fan involvement. They have contests like I did. Speaking of which, congratulations to Nicole. Your t-shirt was on the way as of the time of this recording. It looks like it was nearly getting to you according to my UPS tracking. So hopefully you got the shirt. And congratulations on winning our contest. Thank you for submitting a screenshot of you being subscribed to this particular podcast, even though it was open for anybody who submitted a screenshot for any Double P podcast. Speaking of which, this podcast is part of the Double P Podcast Network. You'll be able to catch our videos on the Double P YouTube, which is youtube.com/c/the word double, the letter P, the word media, all strung together. Double P Media. youtube.com/c/double P Media. Although if you're watching this on YouTube, then you already know where to find the videos. But another thing you can do, they're my bosses. It's Bubba and Catfish. They are Double P Media, and if you have any complaints about me and my solo podcasts, then feel free to send them to @theword_double, the letters PHQ on Twitter. The word double, the letter P for podcast, and HQ for headquarters on Twitter, and they will admonish me in the proper way, which I'm not exactly sure what that would be. because so far nobody's complained to them. But be the first if you wish, or tell them that you like these solo podcasts. That's cool with me too. As for this podcast, as I stumble upon my words, as for this podcast, you can always tweet to me at Bust Blockbuster. The word bust, the word blockbuster, all strung together at Bust Blockbuster on Twitter. You can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com. That is MATTS audioblog@gmail.com. I said Gmail a little weird. Or you can use the contact form and find all of the stuff that I do by going to mattsaudioblog.com. MATTS audioblog, all strung together, .com. That's enough about the podcast housekeeping. And so we will move on to getting to the feedback that you guys gave. And I didn't get a whole lot of feedback, but I did get some. And so we want to make this part of the TV friendly part, because this is stuff that Bubba and I talked about. He, of course, is TV only as well, and is going to stay that way, which I like. That's wonderful that he decided this is one book series that he's not going to read, because then I'll always feel like maybe I've got just a little something up on him, even though I never actually do. But as always, we put out polls, of course, for our What's Worse questions. I don't normally do other things on Twitter other than putting out polls, but I appreciate it when you guys participate. The polls were for the What's Worse questions that we did for the final episode, episode 8, Eye of the World. This first poll, what's worse, not demonstrating clarity in a show or deciding to do interviews to clarify things after the show? As you know, I was kind of on to Rafe about the fact that he didn't make some things very clear, loyal, and that was one of the things that I felt could have been addressed in the show very easily, but instead he chose to clarify it in an interview. And if you don't want to know what I'm talking about, don't read the interviews. I'm not going to say what he said in the interview. I'm just going to tell you, I'm just asking you, did you like the fact that he had to explain some things in an interview after the show had come out? That's all I'm asking. And we argued this, and Bubba and I argued these two points. Having the muddiness in the show, or clarifying, or having to clarify in the interviews, which was worse. 600 votes on the 100 Twitter, if you get what I mean. 83.3% of you said clarifying in interviews was worse than it being muddy in the show. So in other words, you're fine with what happened to Loyal being a mystery. You just don't want to read about it the next day in an interview, I suppose. That's almost like 5 out of 6 of you. Again, that's 600 votes on the 100 Twitter, but it's almost like 5 out of 6 of you voted for clarifying in interviews being worse. The second What's Worse poll, possibly releasing the Dark One while trying to defeat them, or being like Perrin and doing nothing, which was a great question by Bubba. And this one received 500 votes on the 100 Twitter. 60% of you said doing nothing was worse than trying to defeat the Dark One and accidentally releasing them. So it's almost like 3 out of 5 of you. Again, 500 votes on the 100 Twitter. It's almost like 3 out of 5 of you voted for Perrin doing nothing as being worse. On to some YouTube feedback that we got. We always receive comments on our YouTube, and I want to go through these. Once again, Priscilla TV comes through with some great thoughts. She also has her own YouTube channel where she was reviewing The Wheel of Time, so be sure to check that out. Priscilla TV says, "Hi guys, I think 80% of the problems came from this season having only 8 episodes. For watchers, the mystery behind The Dragon Reborn was a great way of getting people interested in the series. But in 8 episodes where Ren had to be forced to be in support as a way to keep the mystery going, we needed one episode after the 7th where we concentrated on Rand and Moraine. In short, the episode served well to set up season 2, but not so well as a climax/ending for season 1. Priscilla goes on to say, "Sorry, Matt, no hate for Rand today. He made the right choice." Oh, no, wait a second. The spoiled brat did not even ask Moraine if she was okay after all they went through. Such a cruel kid. You're absolutely right. Moraine should have been one of the Rand haters for this last episode, Priscilla. And Priscilla finishes by saying, "As for book readers, I liked it, but did not love the final episode. Looking forward to season 2. Thank you, Priscilla. Those are great thoughts. Once again, you guys check out Priscilla TV's YouTube channel and check out her reviews. They are in Portuguese, but you can always use the auto translate if you're unfamiliar with that language in order to find out what she's saying. You can use the auto translate on YouTube to get a clarification of what she's saying if you're not familiar with that language. As I continually say the same things over and over. Double Null Test Channel, that's Null Test Channel, added this comment on our last YouTube video as well. In season 2, I want more Aes Sedai on Aes Sedai fights. Excellent. Well, with this version of the Shan coming seemingly to attack the western shores of this land that all of our characters are from, we may see that. We know that the Aes Sedai are aware of problems on the western shore, as Moraine found out from her superior in the baths in, I think that was episode 5 in Tar Valon. So we might see some more channeling kind of fighting in this next season. I would think so, if they're going to take care of this Shan threat. And that is the end of the feedback and the TV only friendly podcast, that portion of the podcast that we have going on right now. So please continue to send in your thoughts. I'm going to be open all year. I don't know if I'm going to do book reader casts where we cover some books before the new series comes out, but I will keep you up to date on news and that kind of things. I'm also going to be covering some Marvel stuff and, just Star Wars stuff. Any of the big franchises, we're going to keep going. And obviously in 2022, we're going to get the Lord of the Rings series from Amazon as well, which would definitely be considered a big budget blockbuster. So we'll be covering that, and I'll have other guests as well as hopefully Bubba once again to talk about all of this stuff. Don't forget, at Bust Blockbuster on Twitter with your thoughts. If you have thoughts about me that you don't want me to know, then send them to @PHQ on Twitter. You can always send me emails, mattsaudioblog@gmail.com, and you can go to the website, mattsaudioblog.com, in order to find all of the things that I do. We're going to have a brief intermission here, and then we're going to go back to two guests from TV podcast industries, John and Chris, who are both great thinkers and speakers regarding this series on a TV perspective, but they're also book readers. And so it'll be a fun conversation to have. If you're a TV only person, this is your time to fade out or turn off. And thank you so much for listening or watching on YouTube. Take care. Back with John and Chris in a minute. You have found the book reader section. This means that you're a book reader, right? Wait, you're not? You're a book reader, but you don't mind being spoiled about book things within the show The Wheel of Time and regarding to the last 2 episodes of that series on Amazon, right? No? Well, this is your final warning. Get the heck out of here, because we're going to be talking about all things books. And I know these particular podcasts tend to just be me rambling and often whiny like Rand during these sections, especially, that the way that Rand is in the books. I'm not going to be that way today because I've blown the horn of Valir. Wait for all of these great Wheel of Time euphemisms coming up here. I've blown the horn of Valir. I have actually begun to call two podcasting heroes from the Age of Legends to help me out to talk about the books with these particular 2 episodes. And they are from TV Podcast Industries. Find that podcast at tvpodcastindustries.com. That's where you find all of the great stuff that they do. They did something like 100 podcasts last year. It's ridiculous the amount of work these guys do, where I do like 5 a year or something like that anymore. But it's amazing amount of work covering Marvel, covering animation stuff, covering Star Wars, covering all kinds of fantasy shows as well. So I'm very pleased to have them. I'm going to start with probably the person who would be our Amerlin seat because he's read the books more often than the dragon has been reborn. It's Chris. Chris, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Matt. It is a pleasure to be here. Yes, looking forward to this actually because we have on TV Podcast Industries, we covered the whole of season 1 of The Wheel of Time. I've read the books a couple of times through, and then I've only, we were speaking just before we went on air, I finished the final book of the series, and then I put the series down. And I was like, okay, that's it. Just now, we'll give it a breather. But with the reinvigoration of everything Wheel of Time, especially on Twitter, as the season kind of ramped up and went through, I've started rereading. So, and even I'm finding bits where I'm like, oh, that thing in book 1 now completely correlates to book 15.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, okay, now I understand it.
Exactly. And our other guest is John from TV Podcast Industries, who, let's not call him a novice. He's more like the accepted in that way because he's plowing through these books very quickly. He started as a little before the season began, and I think he's already starting to get through book 3. So we welcome John. John, welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, Matt. Yes, I am on The Dragon Reborn. Just bought it. I've flown through the other 2. Maybe after this, though, I might be the stilled. I don't know. Rather than the accepted. It depends on how my knowledge comes across, but it's certainly fresh. It's certainly fresh into these books. And yeah, I've been loving it. And I've actually loved how they've adapted them to the show so far. So I've really loved covering this show, and that is in big part thanks to Chris, who was uber fan of these. I hadn't read them at all, despite really loving fantasy stuff. So and luckily for me, it's much easier to read for me than Lord of the Rings. So. Which we will also be covering on TV Podcast Industries, actually. Middle Earth, another Amazon Prime. So, really enjoying the run of fantasy stuff at the moment and the books that they've adapted.
It's definitely been a while. Like, we had sci-fi for years, but, like, we got the odd one here and there across TV and kind of films. But you had the Lord of the Rings. And then when that and The Hobbit were really in vogue, you had like the Chronicles of Shannara and a few others that they just weren't given the budgets that the one what we're getting now across kind of stream sites, kind of like the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Apples, like, so they're coming back into vogue with the budgets that you really need. To kind of, because a lot of it, the high sorcery, the magics, the huge castles, you need that budget to really make it live on the screen. Otherwise, everything's just kind of in your imagination. You can see this, and like when they do it, it's like a little cardboard kind of cutout flying across the screen, and you're like, "Yeah, no, that's not what I imagined at all."
It's a bit like 1950s Doctor Who, I guess. Yes, exactly.
Exactly. Don't look at the cardboard. Don't look at the cardboard.
And my only comment was going to be anything's easier to read than Tolkien. So, let's move. Let's move on to some talking about some of these episodes that we've been doing. And guys, I want you to throw in your own points. I just wrote down a few notes here to try and help myself through it in terms of what we were going to talk about. But feel free to add your own. Feel free to criticize me on any of my takes as well, because as my listening audience knows, this is what everybody has fun doing, especially when Catfish gets at me regarding some of my takes. But the first topic that I wanted to bring up was the subject of Pod and Fane showing up in episode 7. Even though I think you only briefly saw him when Perrin was like going through town with Nynaeve and he thought he saw him. But you knew the second that he walked out of the Waygate that was him. Did you guys catch the whistling thing that they were trying to do? I felt it was almost too subtle, but they kept doing this whistling thing. If you listen to Pod and Fane's whistling at the beginning of the series, when he first comes into town, you hear little snippets of that at Shadar Logoth, which woke Matt up, and at of course you hear it in episode 5 when Matt and Rand are going into that inn in Tarvalin after Rand terribly says that Matt needs to clean up. I think that was awful rude of Rand. It's a double R. Anyway, and then finally you heard it again right before the Trolloc attacked in the Ways in this episode 7. You guys were hip to that, right?
Yeah.
What was going on there?
It was very subtle.
Yeah.
Very, like, it was only the fact that I knew what was coming and who was coming and things like that. It was. Now, when they get to Faldara, that's not subtle because him coming out of the Waygate, you know what he looks like from episode 1. But the shadow in Shadar Logoth, the other, like, the Waygates that just silhouette, that's not that. I have to actually give them a hat tip. Like, the whole point, if you didn't know who it was, the reveal in Faldara of the gentleman who looks like Padden Fane, that's actually, for a first time viewer, no one who has no knowledge of this, that's cool. The rest of it is kind of slightly too subtle. I felt the whistle was too subtle because it just didn't. I didn't connect it until we had. I think we discussed it, or in one of the podcasts.
I think we had. Yeah, I mean, it is subtle. It really is, but it is what once you're aware of it, it's a nice thing that keeps cropping up, and certainly around the Dark Friends or Dark Spawn moments in the across the episodes, and of course. Like, as you were saying, Matt, I mean, with Padden Fane, he was there all along. It's really good to see him again because, you know, we get him in episode 1, but like as well in the book, he's there right for and kind of comes along. You know, you get the sense of this guy following them as they make their way through the world. Mm-hmm. And to some extent, you don't really get that in the show so much. Until you realize the whistling and it's almost his invisible hand that's operating in their moments through this world. So I mean, I also think the actor here, I just really love him. I think he's certainly with the last episode, and I'm so glad that they did finally sort of bring him up front, even though it was quite subtle. And even in the Ways, you do get that glimpse of his silhouette as well. Like it's very fleeting. It's it looks like the mists have formed, and you're wondering, well, is that maybe because of all the dreaming? Is that the Dark One or something? But then you realize you get that same kind of silhouette as he leaves the Waygate. But I thought I really like this character from the books, but I also think they've done a great casting here with the guy that plays him in the show.
Yes,
I agree. The only bit I feel that now again, this is we talked about this in our kind of wrap up of the season, in that we kind of felt that episode 8 could have done an extra 10 minutes. But overall, the season could have done with probably another episode, maybe 2. And this Padden Fane is one of them, because one of the reasons. Do you remember in the very first book, the introduction to Padden Fane and how he meets the village council, and we do get this, and then even Tom being introduced at that point as well. The two of them, you get to know their characters, or you get a bit more time with them in that sense. So with Padan Fane, you get to know how he is that kind of, he's very charismatic and smiley, but there's a dark undertone. So with, like, for example, Tom in the book says, Padan Fane, he always brings the bad news fast and worse news faster.
All
So
right.
he's this kind of brings this terror. He's that kind of, he loves bringing, when the reveal happens of who Padan Fane is, it's, oh my god, this really nice guy who you've always had a bit of a weird, like, he's always been slightly off. You're not sure why. You start to understand why, because he is a dark friend, and like a key dark friend. So I feel we got him like very slightly in the beginning, because like Matt in the TV show tries to sell him the stolen brooches and that type of thing. So you get this kind of, oh, he's a bit seedy. But we don't get the other side of it, where he's this charismatic piece. He's just very cool, like suave. That's what kind of comes off. And so casting was choice with me. I just felt we could have done with another scene or two with him.
I agree with that. I will also say this. I remember, and gosh, this was way over 20 years ago, but I remember the first time that I read the first book. There's two instances that you guys alluded to about them, about Rand feeling like he's being followed. One in Berlon and one in Camelin. And since they didn't use either of those places so much in this series, it was hard. I guess they went to the whistle for it, and that's fine. But I remember reading when Padan was stumbling up to Rand in Camelin, thinking, that's Tom. That's got to be Tom. They can't kill Tom. I had already gotten so connected to Tom. And of course, he doesn't show up, and I don't think again until book 2. But I just was sure. And I'd completely already forgotten about the Berlon incident. Whereas, like, if I'd have just put 2 and 2 together, I'd have seen it was the same guy, even if I didn't know who it was until, we get Padan Fane stumbling in at the end of the first book. But nonetheless, I love that. And speaking of the way that they started to throw in, I mean, this series, guys, you will admit, did a lot of things in terms of bringing some of the stuff forward, especially from book 2, when you think about like the Amerlin seat and her and Moraine's kind of secrecy regarding everybody else. All of that stuff happened at Fal Dara at the beginning of book 2, right? And they just kind of said, well, let's just go to Tar Valon. It's what everybody wants to see, and let's put it all there, which I thought was a brilliant stroke. But combining, I'm kind of moving on to episode 8 here, just so we can stay in the Padan Fane thing. But combining the Horn of Valir being taken, and all of that with the battle at Fal Dara, or more or less, do you guys feel that was good? Do you feel, Chris, I know you alluded to maybe we could have used some extra time at the end of episode 8 to further explain things. Was the Horn of Valir being brought forth from the second book into the first season? Did you expect it? And because to me it makes chronological sense, but at the same, and a way to condense it all. But at the same time, you didn't get much of an explanation about what the horn is or why we're so invested in it.
The thing I would kind of take from what you've just said there, Matt, is, and I think they did a really good job, is it does condense it. It's like not having Camelin or even Belian, that kind of road. I think, so I like that they condensed it like this. I think coming back, though, to the whole Padan Fane is because within the books, Padan Fane is effectively a prisoner, and everything that happens in there right at the start of book 2, well, at the end of book 1, like he's captured ultimately and imprisoned in Fal Dara, and that the whole attack on Fal Dara, or at least the Dark Friends sort of getting past the defenses of Fal Dara, and so you kind of miss all. You miss all of that. And I guess for the show, maybe you don't really need it. But again, it's just that other connection with Padan Fane with the 5 companions that you get there, because you have Egwene going down and talking to him, thinking that he's not all that bad. And of course, then with book 2, you very soon realize just how much of a threat Padden Fane is. I think the other thing as well is what Chris is saying about, a few more moments with Padden Fane throughout the series, or that the whole season could have done with maybe another episode or two, is, I think, also with Tom as well. I think that's really important because you really get the sense of Rand making a connection with Tom, which I just don't think you got in the series. And this idea that actually,
True.
Because he's got all the stuff going through his mind about his own father and Tam, because of the fever dream, effectively, as he's rescuing him from the Trollocs, which we get later on. I like how they restructured that. In all honesty, but I think I think some of these things it's just you possibly lose a bit more of the depth ultimately of why these things matter when they actually happen. I think the other thing was and I guess it's just simply, as I say, I've only read the first 2 books. I'm just about to start book 3, and I'm guessing that the Lord and Lady of Faldara probably don't really come back into any of the series. I'm not entirely sure, but I love these characters. And so for them being sort of swiftly dispatched, I guess, I know that's more episode 8, I guess, but it's... Yeah, I was a little sad by that, to be honest. But I get as well, the medium is that is the spectacle of what happens. So
Yeah.
I liked ultimately the condensing of it, but I do feel there's bits of depth between characters that you lose out on, or even just the tensions that arise, I guess. So yeah.
So for me, the condensing works for the medium that it is. The problem, so we take the step back. We've talked about this before, and I've used the term burden of knowledge, especially when it comes to comic book TV shows and things like that. We've read the comic book, so we know what's going to happen. So we have this burden that we have expectations of how this should go as book readers, in terms of we want this depth between these characters. And sometimes they're going to use shorthand because they just don't have the time. And other times, they're actually probably just going to completely skip parts of it. So the Lord and Lady of Haldara, I think it's a good change. And when you think about let's say, I don't want to spoil John, if they are used in the future of the books, that usage can be transposed to a different character.
Yeah.
So they can combine multiple characters into, parts of one lord could be and their actions could be condensed into some other lord of tier, for example, or anything like that. You have those options. It also allows for, we do know that, say, Lan was born in those regions. So the story of Lan's future storylines can be condensed slightly based on things.
Yeah.
When you start to take all that into account, I think it does make sense. Where it goes bad is, I don't think the importance of the horn in episode 8 is given enough time. We talked about this in our wrap up. It's not given enough emphasis of it's just it's very much a quick line. And it's just okay, well, the secret treasure has been kind of uncovered and stolen. Oh no. But not actually, oh no, the secret treasure that will bring back the heroes of legend to fight at the last battle for either good or bad has been stolen, which is potentially turns the tide of the war. That's not there. So, but it does set up episode 1, season 2, Moraine going, they stole what now? You need to get after it. And then this chase, the hunt, actually a different variation of what we had as the hunt at book 2 can kind of happen. But I think it's just, it relies on more people. It relies on a certain scene in season 2, episode 1, kind of being kind of happening.
Yeah, the thing with the horn that was weird was just because you from book 2 you get the sense that it is hidden, and because of how there are these hunts for the horn across Tia and so on. And I guess it was just because, there were kind of 5 randomers from Faldara that were sort of digging it out and effectively doing the work for Padden Fane, which, I mean, he's a smart cookie. But, I mean, I just thought you could have just, like, left it and then they would have to do it. And then, I mean, I know it doesn't work like that, but I guess it was that element which it just seemed to take me out of it. And of course, yes, as if you're not au fait with the books, it's like, well, what is this casket that they're bringing up? What is the significance of it? The other thing I thought was quite interesting, and I can't really recall how it got there in the TV series, was how come the ruby dagger? I just don't remember that, because I see Padden Fane like he basically sheathes it, and that to me I wasn't entirely clear on, but yeah. Anyway,
he stole it from Tar Valon, and that's all we know right now. I think I know how they're going to do it.
Exactly, but I mean that is off screen ultimately.
Yeah, well, the other question it brings up, and I know that this is partially just because Barney Harris decided, hey, I'm done with this, so they had to just find a scene probably from him first walking into Tar Valon, and just darken it up to make it look like he's arriving there at night, as opposed to the daytime shot that it probably was. But why is Matt coming back there? Doesn't he have a sense for the dagger itself? Wouldn't he be pulled more towards Faldora if that's what was holding him back and that's what he was looking for? I can understand it. I can understand. And again, this is just because of stuff that happens with television shows. Sometimes it's partially out of Rafe's control. But I think that for a TV only viewer, it might be it's weird because it's kind of a mix of book and TV knowledge that I'm using here, because I'm thinking, well, I know that Matt is attracted to the dagger. So why is he going back to the place where the dagger is no longer at, just where he thought it was at last? Maybe his connection to it isn't that strong because they made it seem much more, I don't know, almost innate by the way that Moraine took care of it before, until Matt was standing there at the gate and wouldn't be able to connect with it anymore. Nonetheless, if he's being drawn back to Tar Valon, and yet Padden Fane's, sheathing it up in Faldara, I have a little bit of confusion on behalf of TV viewers for, like, why is it important that we're seeing this dagger being sheathed, first of all, and there's a book thing in itself that to us would have spoken volumes. It's Padden Fane obviously has a connection to it because his connection with, is it Mordeth? Is that the guy's name? Yeah. Or the entity's name from Shadow Logoth.
Yeah.
So
yeah. The Black Shadow, isn't it? Yeah.
So go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry, you were going to say something.
No, so this is one that I think they're going to de-emphasize. I think the pull, the corruption and the pull, I think is going to be pulled back, in that what we'll find is actually Matt did not go with them because, I know it's double negative, but did not go with them because of the pull of the dagger. But he just doesn't, they're going to do it that he wanted to be by himself. He just, like, that, the dagger connection's not there. And he went back to Tar Valon because it's the closest major city or something. And then he's going to, what we're going to get there is, I think he's going to meet Tom. And we're going to get, like, he'll meet Tom somewhere, and we get him and Tom, and that's how he gets more of his gleaming skills and some of that type of things.
Yeah, I mean, you can see from the show that Tom would be protective of Matt because of his cousin, for sure. I mean, the other thing from the show I thought was, because Matt was talking about going back for his 2 sisters, his 2 younger sisters, so it could just be, as you say, he's making his way back, he's currently at Tar Valon, because in book 1, it's more that Moraine heals Matt of the corruption rather than the idea of it being broken. Whereas I guess for the show, she's actually extracting the entity, the shadow, out of Matt and into the ruby on the hilt of the dagger. So it feels like it's in that instance she is separating, whereas in book one you really just get the sense that she's healed him, but that there is more to do and it will come back. So I guess in that sense you can understand why there is a break with him being able to sort of sense the dagger or the entity within it. Having said that, if they are going to continue with that notion, because I mean that's the thing, the dagger is so connected to Matt. I mean that in itself is a big change to de-emphasize that or make that break potentially. Certainly at this stage from my side, having just sort of read the first 2 books, then if they're going to do that, they'll do that. But I mean, if they don't, then also you would feel he would be able to sense, because Padden Fane is following them and has presumably gone through the same waygate at Tar Valon or just outside, that maybe that's why he said he could sense it behind them. And then all of a sudden loses it as Padden Fane goes into the ways. But it's an interesting kind of choice as to what ultimately happens, because in book 2 as well, that sense of Matt finding the dagger becomes as well very urgent because of what happens there. So that was, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. The other thing I just want to sort of bring up as well is that when I read the first, maybe say 120 pages of the second book, it was effectively like the last sort of 3 episodes of the season. So I was like, oh, I kind of know this. That's how much they kind of changed it, mixed it up, or brought in parts of book 2 into the first season. So I thought that was really kind of interesting as well. And also just that it was happening in a different part, with the way it all sort of geographically where everything was happening, because even from book 1, to me, the Tar Valon, back, what was it, episode 6, I guess, that to me all felt like Chameleon, really, with them arriving there like that. But of course, they just supplanted it with Tar Valon to sort of combine things. So again, condensing something, but which works. But I always got the feeling Tar Valon was much more not beautiful fortress-like, yes, and a little bit impregnable because of the Aes Sedai and their reputation, their powers. Whereas because it had so much more of a city around it, it didn't feel as secure, I guess.
So one of the ones I think that we're going to get introduced is, and I don't remember when these are introduced in the book, so I'm going to be somewhat vague for John. But
please,
potential dark friends within the White Tower. I think they are going to introduce that in book 2, in season 2. And that's how Padden Fane gets the dagger. He was in Tar Valon, potential dark friend. We know he's able to command very powerful entities. He's a general almost in what we see when he's with the 2 Fades. So dark friends would have to answer to him. So he could literally go into Tar Valon and certain. John, do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, because I think the big thing at the moment that the TV series hasn't done, which you definitely get reference to it in book 1, and then book 2 it becomes much more evident, is the Black Azure.
I wasn't sure.
And so that's why when they were at Tar Valon, I was looking at all the colours and I was going grey, or maybe that's the black. I mean, maybe they do actually embrace it. I was actually thinking that, the Black Azure wasn't maybe in the sense that sort of secret sect of the Aes Sedai that were hidden. I thought it was kind of, so I was thinking, oh, maybe the greys maybe it's just faded color at this stage. They've had it on for their robes on for so long. But of course, book 2, you find out more about the Greys because of the character Verin, who is central there, and who is a Grey Azure of the Aes Sedai. So
so I think they are a big part next season. I think that is brought up. Because I think moving based on can we also like what Nynaeve and Egwene do in this final episode of episode 8 fast tracks them to the White Tower in season 2. I think they because that's the one bit we are, to a degree, we got very little of. Like, they met with the ambulance seat.
All right.
And she talks to them and tells them they need to be Aes Sedai. But then they go to Faldara. So what we are really missing is them coming back and that whole storyline of the Accepted, the Novice, the Leandrin, Verin, all the other Aes Sedai, and the potentials of who is Egwene and who is Nynaeve. That is not how. That's kind of they talk a lot about it. Well, sorry, they're not a lot. They talk somewhat about it in this season.
Chris,
but I do feel yes.
I got a question just for you, and okay. I want just a yes or no because I don't want to spoil John. Was Moiraine's mention of the man that she knew about in terms of Leandrin, was that too subtle or not subtle enough?
Too subtle.
Too subtle. It didn't point to anything, because I know that I saw a lot of TV only people speculating about certain things that just aren't real. So okay. Sorry, John. Didn't mean to interrupt or put any new thoughts in your head. Continue to have whatever.
Well, that's fine. That's fine. That's got my mind racing because, I just thought it was a bit of slap and tickle in North Harbour that she had, rather than potentially being something possibly, and now I'm thinking more sinister, I guess. And certainly that would figure from book 2 as well, where we get to know a bit more about Leandrin as well.
Yeah. So I'm kind of hoping in season 2 we have 3 storylines. We have the hunt with probably Perrin. Actually, no, you're going to have 4 storylines. You're going to have Matt with whoever, trying to get back to the main group, because right now Matt is separate. Plus also Matt with the new face. We'll see how they address that.
His connection to the dagger is represented in a new face, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, there you go. I think they're just going to do it that he's covered in a, to make him hiding from the Aes Sedai, someone puts a weave on him and he looks like a different person. That's how they're going to do it, like, because weaves and different cloaks of, weaves of transfiguration and kind of making you look like someone else is in the books. So that may happen just come sooner. But you're gonna have the Matt storyline. You're gonna have them probably Perrin going after the Perrin and Moiraine, potentially going after, with Lan going after the dagger, the horn. You're gonna have Rand's storyline. And then you're gonna have, I think, the girls in Tar Valon and that whole kind of accepted novice being trained up, the gates, the testing, everything like that. And culminating with the
you got to have Falma, you got to finish at very least. See, that's the thing. The other thing is what these guys are planning on doing 8 seasons, right? And you've got 15 books to conquer. They're going to have to start combining other elements from other books faster, I would think.
Definitely. Yeah. That's what I was thinking, because part of me is, with the ending of this season, certainly with what Rand says to Moiraine, effectively say that I died and going off on his own, then that is, I mean, unless something just doesn't pan out the way we think it does in the first few episodes of season 2, I'm really intrigued to understand how this these five companions, or at least the split that you see in book 2 is going to play out. Because I really kind of enjoyed that, and I like the fact that, I mean, ultimately by the end of the book, but I mean, they've split them off. Matt's in Tar Valon. You've got effectively Rand wanting to go off on his own and pretend to everyone that he's been killed and has died. And then you have Nynaeve, Egwene, and Perrin together. So that's a very different split than ultimately the way it plays out in book 2. So I'm wondering how, I guess ultimately that all roads will lead to the West Coast ultimately for all of 5 of these, in the same way that the book does, and those ships at the end of this season. So, but I'm really intrigued because they've that's a really different split of the 5 companions. So I'm kind of really intrigued by that. And even just in terms of Moraine, I mean, I guess you can't do to Moraine what they did with book 2 ultimately, at least for sort of the big chunk of the journey that happens in book 2.
Because I think they've alluded to season 2 is going to be book 2 and 3.
Okay.
So
that makes sense.
The only person they have not announced the cast of is Avienda. Yeah. The other Ale, main character, that person. They haven't announced her. And that's why I'm like, because my whole thought process was Rand is going off. He's going to the Threefold Land. He's going to meet the Ale. That's how they making it look. I'm not sure anymore now, because I haven't seen any castings that allude to.
There's no real world evidence.
People. Yeah, and I'm like, okay, maybe they can dye people's hair, so maybe they're just going to do it that way. But the whole Threefold Land, I was expecting, like, he's going off to find his mother, like, based on everything he's like learned in this final couple of episodes. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe they're not touching the Ale. Maybe they're not going to do that whole storyline just yet, which I think is a shame, because I think that's that whole, the Ale and how they look, and the Maidens of the Spear, and Avenenda as a wise one, and all those cool, because also he gets his Rand has significant events and parts of prophecy happen in the Wasteland, Threefold Land, excuse me.
Yeah. But he also has a big showdown at the end of book 2, which I guess they're not going to necessarily remove, and that could be sort of brought forward for sure. Certainly if they're going to cover parts of book 3, which, I mean, I don't know yet about anything around that. So, but certainly, whether it's at the end of next season or whether it's, brought forward so that they can do other elements here, then there is that great showdown and that happens and makes the whole the whole thing with Rand and who he is that much more public. I just think it'd be really interesting. I mean, even down to the I know I'm going into the books here, but
that's the point.
That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know. I keep thinking I'm being too vague, so I don't spoil it for listeners. But the stones as well, and the differences that this kind of different form of the ways, the portal stones that they use, I love that whole concept from book 2, and again, maybe they will touch it or not touch it, and also then with the character Selene, is it, if I remember rightly, the white woman, and from the portal stone, and there's a great thing in the book where Egwene says she's had a dream about a white lady and putting Rand in danger, and actually in the books, the white lady that you're introduced to as Rand and some of the trackers from Faldara go through there kind of doesn't materialize in that sense, that which I thought was going to happen. The other thing I really hope, and this is from I really love the characters, I really hope they do have Hurin in the sniffer. I don't know. I really like some of the.
Now, John, the thing that I have to say about that is because you've got if since the storylines are diverging so differently in terms of the adaptation of the hunt, you almost kind of got to drop Huron simply so that Perrin has something to do, because Perrin doesn't really have a whole lot to do in book 2. So if you make him the key part of the hunt, where he's using his new abilities to figure out how to chase these guys down, I think that's part of Perrin's process. But that's just the way that I'm seeing the adaptation going. But I agree with you. I agree with you, though. I love Huron. I think that Huron's great, my lord.
Yeah.
So
exactly. I think it's weird. I think it's one of the things the TV show has possibly lost the dynamic around Rand so much. Yes, he is, the Dragon Reborn, and there's that huge element. And I mean, maybe that's enough for the TV show for sure. But it is those relationships, like I mentioned with Tom previously, and then like all the way through book 2, I could just sense Rand rolling his eyes at Hurin because he's so proper to him, and just even the whole thing about him being more lordly, and even having to sort of deal with that with Matt and Perrin. So. And I just love that. And also because Hurin survives to the end of the book, I just thought, just a really good character being brought along here. And it's the same with Tom for me as well. Like these two characters really add to Rand's character for sure. Really, in addition to Matt, Perrin, Egwene, and Nynaeve, of course, but it's just because they do get separated and so on. You have these sort of more peripheral characters, not necessarily, certainly not Tom maybe so much, but Tom is in and out though as well, so he's peripheral in that sense, but that really sort of make you understand Rand as well in the books, at least, that drive a lot of Rand's sort of characteristics whilst he's separated from the other 4 members from Emond's Field. So like they're really important in the books, and so you get to really enjoy them. And I was hoping because he survived to the end of book 2, I really hoped that, I was thinking, oh, this could be like his right-hand man further down that's separate from the Emond's Field lot. I could really get the sense, and you get that feeling of Rand having forged his own connections outside of the 2 rivers and his traveling companions with Tom and Hurin. So who knows? I guess, but I think you're right there, Matt, that, it would make sense for Perrin to be ultimately the sniffer dog in this instance, because it would help to unlock that side of Perrin that we probably didn't get enough from, other than, a few kind of excellent sort of David Attenborough shots of wolves running through the landscape,
I totally agree with you that dropping Huron will be a big disappointment. I just almost kind of see it being that way, unfortunately. But what about the other thing in episode 8 that Rafe then had to come out with an interview to clarify? Because we know that Loyal continues to be a big part of the story. In fact, I'm hoping so much in season 2 that we actually get to see, one of their places. What are they called again?
Steadings.
Steading.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that we get to see the steading that they go to in order to find the other portal stone. Just because I want to see Loyal so uncomfortable around girls, because that was so funny to me in the books. But but the way that the show had made it seem, I think it left a lot of TV only people with, and maybe even some book people going, "What did Rafe just do?" I mean, you didn't need to fool us that much. You didn't need to send things astray that much just to surprise us. And then he clarified in an interview that Loyal he's not dead in the television show. But I just thought that, I don't know if that was bad editing or if that was poor play. I mean, it's the one thing I'm going to really be whiny about, and I apologize because I know we like to try to stay positive. It's like, why even do that?
Yeah.
Why even show the shot like that unless you're going to at least take time in the episode, in that particular episode, to reveal it? It felt way too broadcast television cliffhanger.
That is why.
Definitely.
That is why. They wanted that OMG moment, along with so many others when we got. But see, they clarified with Nynaeve. So that was that kind of bit. I was like, well, if you were going to go for that ultimate Game of Thrones red wedding level. Wow,
that's tough.
For that kind of like shock and awe cliffhanger, like, oh my god, this, like, how they've just killed all the, oh my, then you should have cut everyone, like literally had all of us screaming down from the walls, going, they killed Nynaeve, they killed Loyal, like, what the hell is happening? Find out in season 2. You go that, but then probably I think that was the step too far.
Yeah.
That was the one where, okay, well, we can't go there. So we heal Nynaeve. And
because she can heal Loyal.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing. It's like, I feel, I mean, for me, because we know how deep the magic can go from these books and everything, I think it's a little easier actually for us to accept things like what we saw on the TV than it is for TV only people. John and Chris, I don't know how Derek reacted to some of this, but I would think that even as of episode 4, Derek might start to be invested in, well, what are the actual stakes in this show now? If Lan can be brought back, if Nynaeve can come back, I wonder about how TV viewers feel about if there's any real stakes anymore.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing. I mean, I think for me, the depiction of Loyal with Padden Fane sort of turning the knife, and I'm still wondering, was it the blade, the ruby hilted blade? Because
we know what that can do.
Yeah, exactly. And at the time I didn't, but when I read The Great Hunt over Christmas, it is literally, you see the power that blade can do. That's kind of really, for the first instance, for me anyway, where you see the power of that blade, of what it can do. But also then the death of Loyal didn't make sense to me after even more because of his involvement in book 2. And so I think you're right. I think that there is that careful line, isn't there, that they have to walk, is you've got to keep the stakes going here. And I mean, if they're just going to show Nynaeve sort of healing Loyal, or even Moraine having come back from the Blight, because they've just got to be a little bit careful, because I think even Moraine in this first season does talk about, if they do get killed, that they can't do anything about that as Aes Sedai, that they are mortal at the end of the day. So whether it's a lucky arrow shot or a sinister sort of trap or something, you do get that sense that the Aes Sedai are vulnerable and they can be killed, but you need to have that kind of that feeling as well for others. And so, Loyal, and with what happened with Egwene and Nynaeve there at the Battle of Faldara, is really interesting. But if you keep bringing people back all the time, it's a little... Yeah, it removes the stakes a bit, and that's the difficult balance. Not just with this show, but I think with fantasy in general, because you can make up some kind of spell or ritual or whatever it might be that can bring people back. So it is, I mean, so in that sense, you know, they did kill Lord and the Lord and Lady of Valdara. I can't remember their names now off the top of my head, but
Amalisa was the lady, and
Agelmar, that's it. Yeah,
yes.
Amalisa and Agelmar.
Did they? I mean, we saw a spear go through him, but I mean, is he dead? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like that's the other thing. It's like, who could they possibly bring back if they wanted to? Or
I think they're going to I think they're going to shoot a scene now specifically for season 2 that will clarify all of that, which was Nynaeve's not bringing them back didn't bring Lamb back from the dead. It's the brink of death. Brink. I think they're going to say it's all brink of, like, Nynaeve wasn't fully dead when she was burned out. She was the brink of death. I think what they're going to also, I think they're going to lean into the fact that Egwene and Nynaeve, they're going to lean heavily that they are Taviran. That they are some of the most powerful. Now, Egwene was never supposed to be one of the most powerful. It was always Nynaeve. But I think they're going to say that Nynaeve is the son and Egwene is a slightly smaller son beside her, but still way more powerful than most other Aes Sedai. They're going to say that they are just so powerful that they are able to do things unconsciously to a degree, but they still need to be trained. Yada.
Like, I really want them to bring out the Taviran aspect, because, I mean, even in the books, that's one of the big things that's still intriguing me, because I think it's dealt with a lot more in book 1 and book 2 than the series so far, but there's still the sense of it being held back, and a lot of the explanation for me, it feels like it's coming from Loyal, and because of his interest in this group, and certainly with his friendship with Rand. And to me, that feels like, again, I might be totally wrong, but 2 books in, yes, there is the Dragon Reborn, but the Taviran to me feels more like the crux of it, because it's not just one person, that the 5 of them who are from the same village, and certainly 4 of them very good friends, and with Nynaeve being brought into that friendship circle, that I think I said this on our coverage of it. I do feel there is by the powers combined something is going to happen, and I love the notion of that they affect the pattern, because, you know, we keep talking about time and the wheel, but, you know, the opening credits talk about the weave of cloth in terms of the opening credits of this. So it's how that, as I was saying, that they're like a weaver ultimately, and by how they decide to act and change things, they can create a different pattern on the cloth or in the world. So that to me is, I want to see some serious Taviran sort of meddling with the pattern, quite frankly, and because I really like that notion of, because, you know, what will they do, and how?
Easy now, John. You've still got like 13 books to read, so be careful here.
I know. It probably comes in book 12, and I'll be like, oh.
The thing is I love that you brought that up about the Taviran, because it's one of those things where I remember watching Lost, where Damon and Carlton told us the island has a plan. And then I used to turn that over into the Game of Thrones when we used to cover that. And we'd talk about A Song of Ice and Fire. And I'd say, the magic has a plan. And now I can just simply go back to my old standby. And now I can say, the wheel has a plan, and not worry about it too much. But the whole Taviran thing, I love that they are affectingly creating destiny around them in the books, right? I mean, things are changing in the books because they are there in their particular places. And I also looked at this the way that, at least, especially in book 2, when you think about how separated they are in their different little quests there, when you think about it, it's just, it's a fellowship kind of, I guess, pattern that Jordan's following here, in the way that even when they are apart, they're all separately working towards a greater good.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, I think, around Perrin as well. Again, I think, to the point, I'd loved a bit more through maybe a few more episodes, just with the yellow eyes and the wolf brother concept, and so on. Because again, the what's his name from book one? Who Elias again. There was a character I really just loved and he's not in book one for too long, but you get the sense of the connection that there is that connection with Lan and as well with Elias or having possibly been a warder previously. That like there's a few notions of where there's links with Lan, and of course, like I just loved Elias. I kind of, if I was stuck on sort of an endless plane, then I kind of would like to have bumped into Elias, to be honest.
He's coming season 2. They have to. If Perrin is going to
be successful.
If he takes up the sniffer role, or either way, just needs to learn more about the wolf aspect of himself, because we started to get a lot of his discussions about the hammer versus the axe, the blood versus Wayleaf, like violence versus Wayleaf. Like we're starting to get that duality of Perrin, which is a big part of the book. Is he a hammer with a blacksmith, or is he a man who carries an axe?
Not yet.
Who is he?
Not yet. It ain't.
No, but
that's the thing. I'm a little confused by the way of the leaf. I think just
it will come in more. Trust me, it'll be a big thing. But they need to get into that.
I had such a hard time getting my usual podcast partner Bubba, who is a TV only person, convincing him that give peace a chance is actually a pretty good theme to have in fantasy books, and he's not about that. He just wants monsters being beheaded and that kind of thing, and I'm cool with that.
He wants Witcher style. It's just that kind of like we're going blood and guts. No, this and I think that will come. I think Elias is going to be there for the season 2 to bring it in, which brings in, and I butcher this, the dreaming world, Tierra Lahon. I can never.
Don't even ask me.
The dreaming world.
Hang on, I've got the glossary at the back.
There you go.
I'll have a look. I think I am probably still going to butcher this pronunciation because there's so many parts to it. Is Tel Iran Riyadh.
Okay, there we are.
Tel Iran Riyadh. Okay.
Tel Iran Riyadh. There we go.
So the dreaming world. So they've started to introduce aspects of this, which is Moraine saying in the show, dreams have power. We also see in episode 8 when we are introduced to a certain person who in the TV show, let's call him the Dark One. When we're introduced that the dreams there also have power, a lot of power, and he says the exact same thing in the Eye of the World in the TV show at the end when he brings Rand into that dreaming space. But in the show, I don't know with the Terangral, did Moraine enter the dreaming world in the book when she meets Suan? Sorry, in the TV show. So she goes to meet Suan. Every time. So did she use the Terangral just to connect? She channels into it and she goes to sleep and she goes there? Or did she enter it physically to meet her in the dreaming world? Where they have to introduce more of this dreaming world aspects so that we can do then also Perrin's bit, but then also Wayne's bit. There's a load of other... The dreaming world is a huge thing in the overall saga. It becomes more important, less important, more important. So...
Yeah. Okay, because there's a lot of worlds actually within this world, both like geographically, but then over time and space with the ways and the portal stones, and then there's the dreams, which kind of been hinted at from season 1. So like, there's a lot of different kind of like nooks and crannies going on in this world. That
I really hope they introduce the dreaming, because that's some of the coolest visuals. Because of what you learn about, like, so imagine like if you dream it, you can be it. If you dream it, you can do it. That kind of analogy. That's what happens in the dreaming world. So visually in a TV show, that can be some of the most spectacular.
So I've just got a quick question there on that to Chris and to you, Matt. Is that ultimately what happens then with Rand, the Dark One confronting Rand at the end of season 1 here, where he takes him to the picture perfect, sort of alpine shepherd's hut. He's got Egwene there with their young newborn. So is that part of the dream world, or again, is that just something else?
Matt, go for it. I want to hear your view on this one.
Okay. Well, I would say yes, but it's also being directed by whatever we want to call this guy at the end of the season. I get really nervous when I see him being casted as one name and then everybody else calling him another, rather than
call him the Dark One for the episode, because I think so we talked about this in our final episode on the TV, on IMDb, and in the X-ray. For a while they named him someone else,
right?
Beginning,
which made more sense to me, actually.
Yes.
But the whole idea of what the Dark Ones, what he's trying to do here is get Rand to direct his energy towards breaking a seal so that he can get that much closer to getting out.
Yeah.
Okay. So that shows the physical tangibility between this dream world that some of our characters go into and the real world, where there are other laws of physics happening as well.
Yeah.
And because that's what we were saying, because actually for a big kind of showdown at the end between, as I say, we'll call him Dark One for now, and Rand, he kind of just stood there really and didn't put up too much of a fight. So as you say, that idea of channeling it in order to, get him one step further to freedom. So I thought that was really good. I think we mentioned that on our last episode of Wheel of Time. So I kind of, it's also because, the Dark One that up on the Alpine mountainside with Rand is kind of, I know he probably did the Sound of Music after that, but he went twirling through the Alpine meadow. But it's, I guess, because he does mention that about what you can create, in terms of, is this what you want? You can do it, you can create it. So even if I that's why I asked the question, I think, whether it's the dream world or whether it actually, again, he's to some extent maybe, foreshadowing, more deeper look at these dreams, in the same sense that Moraine talks about the power of dreams in the season. So it's kind of just slowly flagging this for the audience.
So I think it was because of there's a whole thing, if you die in dreams, you die in real life. So there's that aspect. And also the Dark One. So
it's like the Matrix.
Yes, exactly. It is the Matrix. There's a great analogy. But the Dark One doesn't have reality warping powers at this point.
Right.
I'm not saying
not enough seals have been broken. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So he's not so this very much for me was the dreaming world. He was like, channel your power into this, do it for me. I'm going to control your dreams. That's essentially what I saw this as.
Yeah.
And I think, but again, maybe they don't. Maybe they sidestep the whole dreaming world.
Yeah.
But I don't know how.
How?
That's the thing. Because you lose the hunter. You lose so many, very important characters, but also very important parts.
Story points.
So,
yeah.
So it's that kind of interesting point.
Okay. And the other thing as well, because this is the showdown ultimately at the end of this season, compared to book one, is really very different in my mind.
Yep.
It is, and to the point of, was that the Dark One or was that a capital I? Because the other thing is we don't at all, and they're very much in the book being talked about are the Dreadlords and so on, and
Forsaken.
and all of this, which is part of that battle in the book, and it is almost like this proxy battle. So maybe it is the case within the season that ultimately this is a proxy battle happening.
John, one thing that I did want to say is I felt like TV show reviewers, if they were paying attention to some of these things that we've been alluding to, well, that, why call him here this and then call him that and what have you. That guy was, capital I was mentioned in episode, what was that? 3
or 4
by the dark friend. So it's kind of like it was too much. It wasn't that much of a mystery in the book as to who you were really. I mean, you kind of got the idea that there were certain things that would work or wouldn't work against the Dark One. But even in book 1, the stakes were so different for Rand. Yeah. I mean, that was focused around not even his real mother, right? It was his adopted mother.
Yeah.
Being burning in Shao Ghul, that was his big motivation against Balzaman at the end, right?
Well, that's it. It's and also because his companions were that much closer to danger. And with Matt and Perrin being, almost in the crux of all of this as well. So you got that sense of them being much closer to I guess, or even just adding those questions as to whether Rand is the Dragon Reborn, because that also persists into the second book, where yes, they know he channeled, but they're not necessarily thinking of him as the Dragon Reborn, but more that, well, he's a channeler, and we could be as well. So that there's still the doubt and the impetus of Matt and Perrin that they. Maybe it's a little weakened, but that they could also still be the Dragon Reborn, because their concern for Rand is that he can channel and go mad, and with the Aes Sedai, and them knowing. So I thought that was, and I think, as you say, Matt, it's also his adopted mum that he, his it feels like in the book, Rand's motivation for what he does and from where he is able to draw from the source is sort of a wider combination of things, with his companions being there and in danger, as well as with his mum and so on. I think, that actually, it changes it slightly how they've done it. Well, it changes it quite a lot. And I think also, to your point previously around Padden Fane and his whistle, is that too subtle? I think possibly they're being a little too subtle for non-book readers by just with the Eye and the Dreadlords and so on. It could be, they could have been mentioned by Moraine at any point around the Dark Friends and the Dark Spawn and with the Fades, because effectively, it's like Trollocs, Fades, Dreadlord. You get that clear hierarchy very quickly in the book, in book 1. That, and so maybe it's a little bit too subtle for the sole TV audience, maybe.
I agree, because there were lots of things, just going back to the Padden Fane thing, because, the three of us here, we know that Padden Fane is going to show up again. So it was very easy. But when we got to episode 7, that was so great. They did the whistle. And Bubba's like going, I didn't notice any whistle, and so it's kind of like he was confused as to how this guy could suddenly pop up out of nowhere, especially being in the ways. Even though you get the sense that, he just hopped on the back of a Trolloc and said, let's go.
Yeah. And even with the ways that it's interesting, isn't it? I'm wondering why it was Moraine that opens it up. It almost feels it's great. It looked fantastic on TV for sure. But I mean, ultimately, you don't need to be an Aes Sedai to open it up. You just need to know where
the leaf is.
Yeah, where the button is, effectively. And it's like trying to, which button do I use to sort of stop the timer for the nuclear launch kind of thing. It's like, it's which leaf is it that I need to turn? So I thought that was kind of interesting because it means you go, well, how did Padden Fane get in there? Does that mean he's a channeler, or it becomes... It adds something which is interesting, and it probably won't go anywhere. It won't need to. But given that there's a lot of... Well, again, it's to the other point. I guess the ways may also just be finished now because the whole Black Wind, the Madden Shan, if I've pronounced that right, it comes in book 2 as well, rather than book 1. So, that's brought forward as well, and is very much focused around where it seems to be following Rand in terms of his attempts to use the ways in the second book. So I guess the ways may have sort of, at least for the time being, won't be the route, the preference to travel now. And so, yeah.
Could this be a way that they bring the portal stones in simply because...
Yeah, I think so, because
obviously they're used for them to get out onto Tom and Head, but maybe they need it more. They could even say somehow. Well, although I think it would be harder to explain how Padden Fane used a portal stone, than him using the ways.
Yeah.
So
I think they're going to bring him in. I think because, and this is actually a bit we haven't touched yet. Is Moraine shielded or stilled?
Yes.
Yeah.
So what have they done there? I'm gonna go with shielded, that it was tied off, so that she can still sense it, but she can't touch it. But I think that's where I'm thinking. But the more interesting bit is potentially it brings parts of the book. So she's stilled, and then she has to be healed, which is impossible right now, potentially.
Right.
But that's if they find the right people and do the right bits, and then potentially
is it possible? Yes, exactly.
Is it possible? Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's one thing because she can't travel, and the other two trainees can't control their power correctly, they're going to need to find another way to travel now coming into season 2. So that's why I think they do find the stones. I think that's how it all comes in. And I think the first way is, where's the closest setting to Paldara? We need to bring Loyal there, meet other Ogier. Now, if Loyal, he's confirmed he's not dead, so I think he's greatly wounded. Nynaeve needs to heal him. He's still quite weak. The longing is too big. Bring him to the steading, get stones and stuff there, travel off in other directions from that point. But yeah, I think that's going to be the interesting how they do and what they do there.
I kind of think she's probably shielded as well, because it's not to say if I'm picking up possibly from some of Chris's loose lips, then yeah, exactly, sinks John's enjoyment of the rest of the books, and then I guess she might get properly sort of cut off at some point in the future, but certainly from book 2 at least, she would still need to be able to sort of tap into the old source. So I guess it would make sense for her to be shielded, and certainly because at least initially it does the same thing that they were doing to shield Loghain,
exactly,
with that kind of mesh of the weave that goes.
But then you need a male channeler to undo it. So then Rand has to come back.
Yeah.
At that point. This is where
Well, there's no better vision in my mind, Chris, than Lan going out, finding Rand, dragging him back by his collar, saying, "Hey, we got work to do."
Because he needs to train. He needs to train him as a blade master.
Yeah.
That whole aspect of
Exactly.
Heron Blade and all that was kind of touched on.
Yeah, and he kind of needs it for the end of book two. Wherever that comes in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that massive battle, like in the sky. I hope they do that.
Yeah,
because
me too.
That will look epic. Like that battle in the sky, and also the wound that is received. It's like the having to basically accept the wound, learn to accept the wound, to go for the blow. That whole training, that whole move. I think they do that, but again, it's that I can't connect the dots right. This is one of the reasons I'm so interested to see how they do season 2.
I think so. I think for me, the thing I'm really having difficulty at the moment, and is because they've said it's eight seasons, and there's 15, 16 books. So I'm like going, how do they do this? You know, as you say, as you said before, Matt, this idea that they probably need to start hurrying a bit more of this condensing going on. And now, I don't know, maybe the books get a little bit more sort of, maybe less condensed with information in and of themselves as you move through. And maybe, but I'm just there going, I can't see it just yet how they will condense, because there is so much. But it's probably a bit like with Lord of the Rings, you know, when you listen to and this, I'm sure this is what Rafe is doing. But when you listen to Peter Jackson and his wife and the other writing collaborators, I mean, they effectively said they stripped the Lord of the Rings literally to the bare bones in terms of that thread, almost like the children's book version of it, and then gradually built it up again around that, pulling in different things and so on, to the extent where, you know, but only
9 hours of movies.
Only where it made, except where only where it made sense, because, you know, those books are more than as such just a novel. It's almost an academic exercise in some respects as well. So, with certainly with the language of the elves and all this kind of stuff, and I guess that's ultimately what Rafe has got to do, that maybe there will be the equivalent of Tom Bombadil from the Wheel of Time books that just is never comes up. They'll never touch it, and they'll have to just push that to one side.
Well, the Green Man,
you know,
the Green Man's
the Green Man's already.
Well,
Green
that's
Man,
true. Yeah, from the first book. Yeah.
I think season 2's book 2 and 3. They've alluded to that. I think we're going to get the ending of season 2 is the ending of book 3 and 2. And I'm not going to, just because John is going to read it in the next 4 weeks, I'm not going to say, but I think for all the book readers know what I'm talking about. How he is fully proclaimed, i.e. the title of the book, The Dragon Reborn, that ending. I think that's the ending of book. I think that's the ending of season 2. I think they combine that piece on that ending with the ending of book 2.
Oh,
and they kind of smash
so to have all of that happen in Tom and Heads in some way to finally get the...
No, in Tyr.
Oh, in Tyr. Okay.
I think they do it in Tyr because of the other thing. The other two bits. They smash them together. Okay. And I think that's how we get it, because then at the ending of Matt's storyline is, to a degree, at the end of book 3, puts him in the right place, it puts him with the right people. I think they smush it all, and you get midpoint of season 1 is Tom and Head, and then the other aspects of Tom and Head. The ending of book 3 is the season ending of season 2, because that also then gives you end of season 2. You move into season 3 with the Sechan. You can have them as this big Shan-Chan, sorry. you can have them as this big looming shadow across all of season 2, and then they are fully like at the end of season 2 they are, then it's like, oh, they're here, they made their way across from the far shore, they were starting making their way across, they're really here, it's everything they are, and you get fully introduced in season 3 as the big bad.
Yeah, well, it's interesting as well, isn't it? Because with the and I know it has
Sean
been
Shen.
that's it, the Son Shen, and I know there has been reference to Arthur Hawkwing,
Yeah.
but again, it's still, I think Egwene just very much dropped it into conversation. So
And Silverbow.
So
they haven't talked about Silverbow yet. Brigitte Silverbow.
No, not a clue who Silverbow is. Is that so? I mean, ultimately, I think like there is huge amounts there. I mean, I think that I can't wait to read the third book, I have to say, and because the end of book 2 is kind of, it's almost like, it, literally in the sky, a star is born for this world, and it's kind of like, it's almost like then just with that little epilogue that that Robert Jordan does, it's almost like, and the band goes on tour and is a huge success. It's like it's all kind of, it's, if you imagine it in this world, it's on the news, it's on the celebrity, it's like it's happening, it's the event of the year. So I'm really intrigued with book 3 for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what they'll do. I think that I know there is this large discourse at the moment in terms of, again, Twitter. If you throw a pebble into Twitter, you'll find a bad take. But there's always going to be. I said this in the ending of our wrap up. I'm on board with the changes he's making and where Rafe and the writing staff are going, because do you know what? I've read the books.
Yeah.
I'm reading them again. I know where they go. This is an adaptation. I want to see where they're going to take it and how they are going to piece things together. And yeah, maybe we don't get Tom Bombadil.
Yeah.
Fine. We didn't get Green Man. And actually looking back, and I'm like,
agrees.
I'll know in season 2 if that really was a mistake. But I don't think, like, I was happy with what they gave, because they are essentially writing their own path. Like they're like, do you know what? We're not going to be able to adapt every single take, every single conversation, because there's not enough time in the world, not enough money in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say I'm pretty happy with the adaptation so far. I think it's less about adaptation rather than just some of the choices that they've done with characters. I mean, I guess it is partly to do with adaptation. I know we've discussed it sort of as we've been going along, but I think the adaptation of Perrin could be better. I think, and that's the thing, is it's not so much about the large structural stuff at this stage for me. I think I had a concern initially just because you don't get the sense of in this first season of Rand's struggle with his identity in terms of him sort of hearing Tam's fever dream, but they kind of corrected that by just putting it in a different place in the season. But you really get the sense that he's a little bit lost in the book, plus also suddenly being chased by the Trollocs and the Fades, and because of Tam really kind of ingraining into Rand about, I guess, the motives of the Aes Sedai. So I feel you kind of lost that a bit. It's more on the character level, I think, and that's because they're having to build a world first and foremost. All these different different cultures, groups, and there's they're not even introducing all of them just quite yet, instead of, like, say, Camelin or whatever, and the Queen and her daughter and that relationship.
God, yeah, they had to do all that next season.
So that's the thing for me. I feel it's more at a character level, where some of this adaptation is you just pulls away from the characters, because I think there's a real danger that Rand could just come across as a bit of a whiny, sort of entitled kind of, shepherd boy, I guess,
Yeah.
and I think he's a bit more complex than that, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. And I was just going to say, I think the one key thing in terms of adaptation or adopting this series into TV was the path that Rafe chose to make Who is the Dragon Reborn a mystery, because doing that belittled all of the characters in a way, because you had to keep certain things about them a mystery that might reveal that they're not the Dragon Reborn, or that might reveal that they are the Dragon Reborn. And I feel like Perrin was one of the greatest. I agree with you, John. I feel like Perrin was one of the greatest kind of casualties of that approach. And I think it's a great approach for new people who have never read the series, that are just watching the TV show. Oh, good, a good mystery. Who's the Dragon Reborn? I think that that's a fantastic approach. It just feels like that in order to achieve that approach and make it really pay off at the end of episode 7, they had to kind of sacrifice some other things about the characters as they went along.
Yeah, and I mean, interestingly as well, I love the character of Matt from book 1. Absolutely loved him. And I love the portrayal of Matt, certainly initially, and then as kind of gradually sort of got drawn in, or withdrawn, I should say, within himself, then obviously he gets a little bit lost, but I don't necessarily think there was enough time around that as well. And actually, in book 2, I feel like you don't really get an awful great deal of additional stuff around Matt either, which I felt was a little bit of a shame, and that was just purely from the book. He, and as you say, I think he's quite chipper in the book. There's a, despite him sort of physically changing in book 2, there's the idea of Matt's spirit, and it is positive and full of energy in a lot of it's positive, not necessarily positive, but he is full of energy, even though he doesn't look like he is in book 2. And I don't know whether book 2 for me really added an awful lot to Matt for me. And I think that is a little bit of a shame. And because I loved Matt in book 1, and I loved then how that was portrayed in the show. I think it's Matt really that felt like he got the most out of the series as well, because those first 2 episodes, and the first episode in particular with his 2 sisters and his family, really that teased him up so well for me, and I really enjoyed it. Whereas Perrin, because there's no mention of a wife in book 1, and then does what he does, or not that I can remember anyway, but I'm not too sure. I think it ultimately comes down to, yes, maybe this fight between being, the way of the leaf and the way of a top predator, I guess. It's around that and the guilt. But I think, I think Perrin really I just wish they had pulled out the wolf brother a bit more for Perrin. Because he just looked like he was a little bit depressed all the way through the first season.
And pining after Egwene the whole time.
Yeah.
Chris, any final thoughts about episode 8 or the overall adaptation? And then we can we've already kind of talked about looking at some season 2 stuff or series 2 stuff as well. But I did want to kind of go through some of these castings that we know of and kind of speculate on who they are. Some of them we do know, but other ones we can have some fun guessing based on book 2 at very least.
The hope is that I think mid-November, they put out that they were about halfway through principal photography of season 2. I think they're in, where are they? Can't remember where they're filming again, but they're filming in Europe.
Okay.
and they said they're about halfway through principal photography in November. So, giving COVID surges, all that fun and games, I think they'll hopefully be finished maybe around March. So I actually do think we're going to get the. I think we're going to get a yearly release. I think that's the way it's going to be. I think October, November again this year, 2022, we'll get season 2, and it will go again the same kind of format. And I think they'll probably go. They'll start principal photography of season 3 again straight after the same way. I think as long as season 2 gets the ratings that they are looking for, or not ratings, but the critical acclaim, the reviews, the viewership, the etc etc etc, all the as long as it ticks the right boxes for Amazon, which I believe it will. If you look at The Expanse and how they've done a lot of what happened on The Expanse and how that's been covered and how that continued,
Yes,
because it got its final season.
Yeah, it was great.
Season 7, 6.
6, yeah.
6.
I'm currently watching it at the moment. Love it. And
Yeah.
as a segue, there was that huge Twitter thing about
the fan casting.
The fan casting of Shura Agadashlu, is it? I think I probably not pronounced that right. Who's the UN head of Earth in the Expanse? Potentially, I guess it's Varen, but I know that maybe Matt has different money on that. But I mean, okay, it might not come to pass, and it was fan casting, but she is great. I'm sure she could fit into this world very well.
Yeah, so the Twitter discussion initially had it as basically people fan casting her as Katsuene. It's a central character, just based on literally her candor and the character she plays in most films, but also especially in The Expanse. And then she responded, "I'd be interested," and Rafe D. Judkins jumped in and goes, "Let's chat." Yeah. So, if not for that character, they could have it for many other characters.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Including the one that John suggested, which I'm not totally against that either, but I just feel like to have an actress of that stature, give her something. And John, it may be a little bit beyond you right now, so just hang on there, brother. Once you'll know who we're talking about once you get there.
Okay.
Well, let's talk about some other potential castings as well, because we know that 3 names that were dropped right near the beginning of season 1 were Natasha O'Keefe, Sierra Coveney, I think is how you say the name. You guys correct me if you think I'm wrong. They confirmed that she is casted as Elaine, who we know Rand met in book 1, but they skipped over the whole Camelin thing. So my question about that would be, are they just going to drop her in with Nynaeve and Egwene, kind of like the way Egwene meets her in book 2? Or will they have Rand meet her somehow while he's off on his pouty self mission, just wandering around looking for his mom?
I think they meet her in the tower. I think they've skipped that part. Yeah. I think they meet her in the tower, and Rand doesn't meet her for a while.
Okay, very good.
I that's the way I think, because they have him heading in the wrong direction right now.
Yeah.
And to get him, the only way is that if he kind of goes full circle back to Camelin, and then he meets Tom there, but then that leaves Matt on his hole by him lonesome. But it does connect somewhat to the books, so it's that kind of...
Yeah, and there's also the I can't remember how you pronounce the city, but there's effectively the Game of Thrones enclave in is it Caerhane as well,
right.
Where it's it's the game that's being played there between all the houses and the royalty and the lords and so on. So I guess it's will that crop up in season 2? Maybe they transpose it to Camelin and so that they can bring in that city and the queen at least, and maybe that's where Elaine meets Rand, as you say, Matt. But it'll be interesting. I think ultimately, they could also just that whole relationship between Elaine and Rand, at least as I know it so far, could just be transported to a different setting ultimately.
Well, we saw Min skip town at the end of episode 8.
Yeah.
And you know, at the end of book 2, she's jumping into bed, not for, you know, for medical reasons to keep him warm. In the end of book 2, after they've all been talking about him the whole time in the tower, which is hilarious. I found that part of it to be very fun to read.
Yeah.
So how do you guys think they're going to bring Min back in? Are they going to leave it be till maybe a season 3 or something like that?
Yeah, because she's fleeing Valdara, but again, maybe she bumps into Rand on her own. Maybe they kind of leave her out of Tar Valon, because, and again, I might not be entirely correct in this, but with Moraine coming to the bar and Min doing her sort of looking at how the pattern weaves itself around the two rivers companions there in the bar, it's almost, it feels that conversation between Moraine and Min, the way it goes, is almost as though that Min has been rescued from the Aes Sedai and hidden by them. So I get the feeling she wouldn't be in Tar Valon as a result of that. Whereas, you have her in book 2 at Tar Valon, you know, as along with Elaine and Egwene and Nynaeve. So I kind of feel maybe they've just removed her from that situation in Tar Valon. I might be wrong, but it could then be that if she was on the back of a cart, wasn't she, leaving Valdara? So possibly Rand, depending on wherever he's wandering off to, I guess he could go anywhere. I mean, that's the thing. It's just so difficult to know. But there's so many different ways you can speculate. So he could bump into her.
Yeah.
And
I think she comes back. She's too central.
Oh, she will. I think so too.
It's just whether she meets Rand. If Rand goes to the Threefold Land and goes to the Ale, then no. If Rand goes back into the country, out, doesn't go to Threefold Land, doesn't go through the Blight and all that, but goes and into the desert, but goes back, circles back on himself towards Tar Valon and Camlanil and Baelor and all the other major cities and Tyr and everything else, then I can see them meeting up and that relationship kind of coming in there. But having him go out by himself is where I don't know how or why or where certain other characters are going to come in, because you've got all of the Camelin folks, all of that royal family. You've got Elaine, but you've also got her mother. You've got her two brothers, who are central characters. You've then got the other Aes Sedai, and I think that's coming where, like, some of the big ones. So you have two. So what? Yes, they had named 3 other potential, 2 other people, Mira Silal, and then Natasha O'Keefe have been confirmed, but they're who they're going to be is not confirmed.
Okay.
And I've got my money on Viren for Mira, just because she looks like she's about that right age.
Correct. Yeah, I'm with you.
And has that look in her eye.
Yeah.
I wonder, will they? I wonder if. I mean, I guess not. Maybe it's not that important, but obviously, in book 2, there is the whole captain of the Shallow Skulled ship as well. That is also in book 1 as well.
Oh, Doman,
yeah. And I just wonder. I mean, in a sense, you know, it's not critical in book 2, so it might not be there, but it could at least just be possibly referenced at some point, or if they do make their way from Falm by boat, I guess it could be him as well. But I mean, ultimately, he's that whole journey down the river, from book 1 is not
Loved
there.
that. It was great.
And I and just as well because he is a collector of certain old objects as well, which I think with the Sangreal and the Andriel and so on. So again, there may be other ones here that are important, and of course you then get the bit in. So I wonder if they will cast a captain.
Yep.
We know Inktar's been cast. Now, allegedly, and this is just IMDb, and members can edit pages on IMDb, folks, so I don't give much more credibility to IMDb than I do Wikipedia. But evidently, Uno is credited in the first episode of season 2.
Okay.
I thought Uno was gone by the way that the TV show made it look, but I don't know.
Yeah,
but he's kind of Inktar's second man, right, in the books.
Yeah,
during the hunt.
And there's another as well. There's another soldier as well, and
the one that doesn't like Rand, Mesima.
Yeah, Mesima, and because ultimately as well with what happens on the field of battle, at the end of book 2. Again, it's Rand building his, not necessarily by design, but getting kind of like a following. Ultimately, he's turning into the cult that you kind of realize that the Dragon Reborn is, because that's the other interesting thing from Moiraine, is that she gives him a banner that will keep him safe as well. As well as all the tunics that he hates putting on, which I loved. I loved that from the book. I loved his sort of how uncomfortable he was that everyone thought he was a lord all the way through.
We do know we're going to get the White Cloaks back, so we're going to have to get some of those other characters of the White Cloaks in season 2. So,
well, Valda's not dead, right? I mean, he can't possibly.
No, but it's the other, not just the questioners, but the other, the
captain,
the captains.
Yeah,
we have to get them into season 2, and then potentially, so Natasha O'Keefe. So it's because they've introduced the Soldami and the Damni and the Shan-Chan. That opens up that whole aspect of I don't know who these could be. You've also got Fail. John, you don't know who I'm talking about yet, but this character of Fail.
Yeah.
She comes in, like, if they are condensing, she needs to be introduced. And so Natasha O'Keefe has that kind of look, potentially, based on how she's described. So that could be who they're bringing in Natasha O'Keefe. Or there is, so Matt has put a name, and I let him. You take it away. Who else could Natasha O'Keefe be?
Well, Natasha O'Keefe could be Selene, or Celine, I guess. Yeah. Either way you want to say it, but because we know that at least during the book, during the whole portal bit, and ends up becoming a big part of his whole mess once he gets to playing the Days Damar. He meets her, and then there is this other character, and I don't want to say much more than this yet, John, but there is this, as the Age of Heroes are called, there is this woman who appears, I guess.
It's right at the end of book 2, she appears.
It's right at the end of the book, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to say her name is Lanfear.
Yeah, and that's all I know, really.
So that's, exactly. So that's who stage. I think that's the other option. It's either it's one of those three because they have that look about them, in terms of how they are described and kind of saying that look about them sounds terrible. But then there's been a few others. I'm trying to go through the Twitter, but it's always so weird to see who they've confirmed and not confirmed.
Right.
So like Twitter of time or whichever way you want to call it. It's like this person like commented on this Instagram post with this comment. So like one of them, I can't find it, but apparently someone commented with a wolf's head emoji on one of the casting announcements.
Oh yeah.
And everyone's like, he's Elias. Yeah. Like that's it. I'm like, well, no, he could just mean like he could be like. There's multiple ways of taking that. Probably not. Probably it is who you think it is. Yeah. It's that kind of like, okay. I think I hope
so. That would be my big thing. I really hope that Elias is there. Because so. Again, it's just like I really enjoyed Lan from maybe slightly more in the TV show than the books, actually, I think. But I think Lan is really, really good. And there's just it from book one, there is that connection between Elias and Lan. And I just think it could be really interesting. But then it doesn't materialize again. So maybe it's just in my vivid imagination and that that Robert Jordan's sown a little thread or a little possibility and it hasn't quite materialized yet in the books. So, or it may never, who knows?
Yeah.
I'm going to, unless you have any other big points that you want to bring up, then I'm going to wrap this one up and we're going to just say goodbyes. I will not be back to talk about the Wheel of Time on Bustin' Blockbusters for a little while. Because I need a break. Plus, I need to continue my rereading. I think maybe I need to read through book 7 to be prepared for whatever Rafe does in season 2 by this point. But so I'm going to be doing some rereading, but we will be back to talk about Wheel of Time when we have some major news or anything like that. And of course, as trailers and what have you come up. And I do want to, these guys, they came all the way from across the Aerith Ocean in order to give you guys some great insights on the book. So I want to thank Chris and John. I don't know if you guys usually give out your personal Twitters on the podcast or not. I do know at TV Pod Industries is the Twitter to follow on in terms of everything that these guys do. And they cover everything, Marvel, Star Wars animation. They covered Why the Last Man brilliantly. I was part of a podcast that did that as well, and I love that show. It's such a shame that it's hasn't been picked up yet, but hopefully it will continue to be. Why Lives On, and all kinds of things. They've got a great end of the year review out right now, as you're hopefully getting this podcast as well. Be sure to check them out at tvpodcastindustries.com. It's where you can find everything that they've done. Like I said, if you want to hear what they've done in the last year, you've got over 100 episodes to listen to. I do it. I suggest doing it. I listen to most of their stuff simply because, I always learn something. Although I have to admit, guys, I did not listen that closely to your Wheel of Time podcast simply because I didn't want your judgments, which are always right, to make my judgments, which are always wrong, seem even that much more wrong. And so that's why I didn't listen to them as closely this time around. But Chris, do you want to give out your personal Twitter or any information about yourself?
Check me out at Mr. Chris _Jones, because that's how old I have my Twitter. It's basically underscores were the thing. But no, do check out mostly at TV Pod Industries on Twitter for that, or just TV Podcast Industries anywhere on the web. We also have a group, facebook.com/group/TV Podcast Industries, where you can we'll talk about everything that's coming up, what we're doing, etc. So strongly kind of suggest just checking that out. We are wrapping up our Hawkeye coverage this week coming. So we'll do our kind of wrap up season 1 of Hawkeye and discuss kind of thoughts. And then, it's really just waiting to see what comes next. We do know you're going to have your Marvel shows this year. You're going to have Picard. You're going to have... God, there's so much TV coming. So It's going to be an
They're gonna be
interesting
busy.
couple of months.
Yeah, and we've
you
still got The Witcher to come as well.
Oh God, Witcher season 2,
my-
yeah. Oh,
man.
that's got to come soon.
Yeah, but I think because we were affected by COVID, well, at least 2/3 of TV podcast industries was then that was myself and Derek. Then I think we're just going to do it in one episode because it's kind of we're a little bit delayed from what we had originally planned.
Criminal. That's criminal, John. You can't do that. You have to give me each episode breakdown. What are you talking about? Get to work. Stop going to your day job or whatever it is that you guys do,
Exactly.
and just podcast continuously for 24 hours until you get all this caught up.
Well, that's
My
it.
goodness.
I guess we would have to do it like when we watch the Super Bowl. We'd have to probably, it'd be kicking off at 12 and we'd be going to the early hour. Well, 12 midday and then going through till like 6 in the morning the following day. Filled with beer, filled with all manner of food and knackered, I guess.
Knackered.
Excuse me. John, please tell me, if you care to, your personal Twitter. And also, I know that you all have a Patreon page and buy a coffee for Derek so that he can stay awake long enough to edit things. Can you tell me a little bit about that in addition to your personal Twitter?
Yeah, look, you can find me at Johnny RTH, and that's Johnny double N, no H, with spelling. And of course, we're on any good or evil podcast catcher of your choice. I think, as Matt has said, over on tvpodcastindustries.com. We're also, you can always support us by subscribing to the podcast. It's fantastic. And we also then have Patreon at patreon.com/TV Podcast Industries, where you can give monthly amounts or for one-off contribution. We're over on Buy Me a Coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TVPI. And of course, that all helps us to do all the lovely hosting of the website, all the different sort of subscriptions that we need for recording and helping to edit the podcast. So all the support that our followers and listeners, you can do it whichever way you want. As we always say on TV Podcast Industries, sharing the podcast is, of course, sharing the love. That is all very much appreciated by myself, Chris, and Derek, as always.
Right on. And again, at Blockbuster on Twitter, or you can send emails to mattsaudioblog@gmail.com, MATTS audioblog@gmail.com, so you can talk about how wonderful Chris and John was and how terrible I was, as usual.
Not at all. Thank you for having us, Matt, as well. Thank you for having us on board. Really good. And also, we do want to highlight, because it is also a highlight of the feedback that we get in when you provide the musical sort of feedback on the breakdowns of the themes and the composers on the shows. We always really love getting those in. So big thanks.
Well, I'll keep bothering you with those. Take care, everybody.
Part of Double P Media, doublepmedia.com.